When talking about Thanksgiving movies, there's surprisingly not too many options. Now, arguably, the most definitive is John Hughes' Planes, Trains, and Automobiles, which, if you look at any video on this channel, you can probably assume my fondness for it. But what you may not know is that John Hughes actually wrote another Thanksgiving-themed road trip comedy just 4 years later that is often overlooked. It's a pretty fun movie that deserves way more attention, especially around this time of year. It's simply called Dutch, one of what I refer to as an almost cult classic. Dutch is an interesting film because it feels like a knockoff of a John Hughes movie. And I don't mean that as a bad thing. I just mean that it borrows many elements from other John Hughes films, most notably Planes, Trains, and Automobiles, but it also takes inspiration from other Hughes films, like Home Alone. And Uncle Buck.
And, for later, I got a bag of pretzels, and I got a deck of racy playing cards.
It's basically a John Hughes greatest hits movie, and that's probably why I like it so much. This film does manage to stand on its own feet, thanks to director Peter Feynman, who was coming off the success of Crocodile Dundee at the time, as well as the film's two leads.
I don't care for caviar. I make it a rule never to eat anything a fish deposits in a riverbed.
Ed O'Neill stars as Dutch Dooley, a working-class average Joe who's in love with a recent divorcee. And it doesn't get said enough nowadays, but Ed O'Neill is just great. I really wish he had been the lead in more films during this era.
Feisty little guy.
Cast at the height of his Married with Children fame, O'Neill brings a much-needed sarcastic dark humor to the title role.
You like fireworks? Is that a yes, a no, a maybe? Your testicles descending? What?
In the film, Dutch is seeking to impress his girlfriend by traveling from Chicago to Georgia to escort her pretentious snob of a son home for Thanksgiving.
There's no better way for two guys to get to know each other than to spend a couple of days in a car.
After his equally snobby father, played by who else but Christopher McDonald, abandons his plans to spend the holiday with his son.
I have to go to London in the morning.
How does Doyle feel about that?
Haven't been able to reach him yet. Well, you'll be talking to him. You can tell him.
Future Rusty Griswold, Ethan Embry, plays that son, Doyle. And although he's just great, he also makes his character the most awful, unlikable child character in film history.
I'm terrified. I will have you written up. Working in the kitchen will be good for you, Teddy. You can have a taste of what your career at Burger King will be like.
Now, as with other holiday road trip movies, things of course don't go as well as planned. Particularly because these two don't see eye to eye at all.
I'm not going anywhere with you!
What do you like to do for fun?
Of course, some of these road trip shenanigans are predictable, but then there's some real curveballs in the story too. Like this scene, where the main characters get into their standard mid-movie argument that ends with Dutch throwing Doyle out of the car. And I'm sure if you've seen any road trip movie before, you're thinking that Dutch will drive off for a bit, then stop and look back at Doyle in the rearview mirror, feeling foolish before turning the car around to apologize. But nope, Dutch keeps going. He actually leaves Doyle on the side of the road and makes him walk in the snow to the hotel, which is miles away.
You want to close the door?
I could have frozen to death, you asshole!
I don't think he would have frozen. Not solid anyway. It's not quite cold enough for that.
It's great because this is what this kid needs, and Dutch knows it. The two continue to battle wits throughout the film, with Dutch never afraid to call Doyle out on being a spoiled brat.
There's one thing I can do that you can't.
What?
I can pay for my breakfast.
Nothing burps better than bacon. Your water looked tasty.
He sort of becomes less of a father figure and more of a friend that Doyle desperately needs.
You know what? You're like a great big demented child.
Doyle also gets his proper taste of real America and honest people, something he's never really experienced.
Getting hungry for your turkey dinner?
Despite all of this, the film was a financial and critical flop. One of several 90s Hughes films that underperformed on all expectations. It's one of the last John Hughes movies that feels like, well, a John Hughes movie, as he would keep moving in the direction of making more family-friendly slapstick comedies before retiring just a few years later. It's also worth pointing out that stars Ed O'Neill and Ethan Embry would reunite as a team 12 years later in the 2003 Dragnet reboot, which only aired for 2 seasons.
She parties a lot, goes to raves, went to Burning Man out in the desert.
So you're thinking she could have been in that car. What are you gonna do? Buy your sister a gun? She'd blow her foot off.
No, it's just that she's reckless. And with these random killings.
Random. I got a problem with random.
Dutch may not be perfect for sure, the character and the film, but it's also not worth the vitriol it received upon its release. It's a perfect companion piece to other Hughes holiday comedies and will perfectly bridge the gap between your annual holiday screenings of Planes, Trains, and Automobiles and Home Alone. Give Dutch a watch this Thanksgiving.
Have you ever seen a night so long? Stars begin to cry. That means they've lost the will to live. I'm so lonesome I could cry.
Hey everyone, this is Joe with Hats Off Entertainment. Thank you so much for watching this Almost Cult Classics review. I did just want to remind anyone that didn't know that we have launched a spin-off podcast called Almost Cult Classics the Podcast. We have launched a separate channel for that podcast, which you can find here. I encourage you all to subscribe there for other bonus content that relates to some of the videos on this channel. Thanks so much for watching.